George of the jungle, strong as he can be.
What do you mean, you got the appraisal back? I never saw the appraiser, George. Well, you don't always need to. Thanks for coming into thecreditjungle.com today. This is George Anderson. And today we're going to be talking just briefly about the difference between a uniform appraisal, an appraisal waiver, and a desktop appraisal. So there's a couple of things to keep in mind here is that with the advent of COVID, now almost 2 years ago, there was a directive that came out from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac back in March of 2020 that said maybe it's not a good idea to have appraisers going into homes during a pandemic. And so they created a temporary policy that would allow for a virtual inspection of a property or no inspection at all. And so this has kind of gotten a lot of news, and so a lot of real estate agents have thought for some reason that it means that we no longer need an appraisal, but what Fannie Mae decided to do was to extend the waiver for an in-person physical inspection. So there's three types of categories. There's always been two. There's always been, what we would call a uniform appraisal report, which is just basically a full appraisal, and that has an interior inspection that is performed by the appraiser. And everybody is always fascinated with how quickly the appraiser can come in and out of the house and do this stuff, because remember, he's not doing an inspection per se. He's just checking to make sure that there's not, big sagging piece of sheetrock that's got water damage from a leaking roof and just things like that on a conventional appraisal. And then they always had what was called a desktop appraisal. And that desktop appraisal basically just meant that the underwriting guidelines, the automated underwriting system, whether it be desktop underwriter or loan prospector, Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, basically just said, we're comfortable enough with this loan. We don't really need to have the appraiser go in and do an inspection. Just verify that the property's there. He doesn't need to go in, pull your comps, and we'll accept the appraisal. And you would typically have that. And then the other option that you just basically get is you get a waiver where Collateral Underwriter, and we'll do this in another video, talk about Collateral Underwriter, but they basically just say, we're comfortable enough with this loan that we just don't even need an appraisal at all. So what happened during COVID that they implemented as a temporary measure and has now been extended, and it may become more permanent, whatever that means, but we've got what's called a hybrid desktop appraisal, which means that the appraiser doesn't need to go into the home, but he could use information from a prior inspection, like had the home sold maybe a year ago or a couple years ago. It's not real specific on that time frame, or they could use a virtual tour, which a lot of real estate agents will hire a photographer, and they will do a series of interior photographs that they'll put on FaceTime, YouTube, or they'll do it and associate that video of the interior of the home with the listing presentation on the home. And Fannie Mae has said, well, hey, a lot of these, we're getting a pretty good interior, professionally done inspection here from from the listing agent who's presenting the property. Let's go ahead and use that temporarily during COVID. And they said, what, we're seeing that this is working out well enough. Maybe we don't need the appraiser to go into the home every time if there's an in-between option there. So we're not really reducing the amount of requirements for the appraisal as far as what the appraiser needs to do, but we're limiting the number of incidents where they need to physically go into the home. So that's how your appraisal can get done, and you never knew that the appraiser came by. So anyway, thanks for coming into thecreditjungle.com today. This is George Anderson. Remember, you can push button and get a mortgage professional, and I'd love to answer your questions and help you with your situation. Have a great day.